The Backrooms has thousands of levels, but these are the ones you definitely are going to want to avoid at all costs. Welcome to the most unfair Backrooms levels. Category: endless house-like hallways. Entity threat low. Environmental threat psychological. If you're not careful when roaming around the abandoned suburb and you enter the wrong house, you could just as easily end up inside of the scattered rooms. Reports from people that have been inside often mention falling into a sort of darkness. All the halls just end up leading into more rooms and staircases. The house doesn't really make any form of sense, and the only thing that can be considered different is the vent systems that occasionally will adorn the walls. However, it has been reported that no one that has entered the vent system has ever returned, so only go in there if you're truly desperate. Each room is lit extremely unevenly, making sure there is plenty of questionable dark rooms for entities to hide in. Some rooms appear normal, others are extremely claustrophobic and make you question your life choices. This level is so poorly documented and different to navigate that once you're here, you likely won't ever leave. This is made worse by the schizophrenic-like hallucinations slowly creeping in on you after spending more than a few hours here, making it appear as if things are all around you. The worst of this includes footsteps that sound like they might be a few rooms over, slowly moving closer and closer, but never quite reaching you. This isn't even going to be fixable with the traditional remedy for insanity that are used in the Backrooms, like almond water or other methods. Rather, it's going to continue as long as you're in the level. Not to mention there's an unexplainable, almost ambience playing in the background that'll only stop until eventually you get so tired of it, you just say fuck it, whatever's in the vents can't be that bad, and you decide to go in there yourself, only to discover it is even worsely lit and more dingy than you thought before. This is also where you're going to be finding the only real entities in this level, who are mostly just going to be watching you, waiting for you to make a mistake as you try in desperation to get out of this level somehow. But it is likely that this is going to be your final level, as most people aren't usually successful with navigating this area. Since this is the first level on our list, it'll be getting our #1 spot, but we have tons of levels to go over today, and they're always going to be subject to lose their spot on the list. Not to mention we are going to be going over some of the unfair entities as a bonus at the end, so make sure to stay. Category: natural disaster prone fields. Entity threat none. Environmental threat dead zone. Endless Midwestern charm, with wheat farms as far as the eye can see. But no level comes without its downsides, or in this case, dangerous sublevels. Residents of level 10 frequently report their loved ones, friends, and colleagues disappearing at random, only for their remains to be discovered either falling from the sky or in a field somewhere, either dried and burned or thrashed and with every bone in their body broken. This is thought to be the work of level 10's less cool little brother, level 10.4, aka Propsy. You're probably wondering what can make something seemingly so similar be so much more hellish. Well, where level 10 has mostly luscious wheat fields that are plentiful for harvest and sustenance here in the backroom, level 10.4 is going to be frequently shifting between two extreme weather states. One where every single source of food and water simultaneously dries up and dies, which includes you if you're not careful, resulting in you having to run for a barn or another shelter if you want to live. And the other isn't much better, as is basically just world-ending tornadoes and lightning that rip up everything in sight, including destroying most of your shelters. So you can probably guess that those two don't go well together. I wish I could say the saving grace is that it's hard to enter accidentally, but yeah, you basically just show up when you trip on something. That's great. Compared to 9.5, how does this scale up? Well, in the event of a dark hallway or death by tornado, I think I'd take my chance in those vents, which would put 10.4 at our #1 spot for now. Category: destroyed cityscape, entity threat high, environmental threat dead zone. So let's say you make it out of the field before anything major catches you off guard. You would then likely end up in level 11 or the infinite cityscape, where most commonly you would find yourself walking down a highway. It's weird though. Where did all this fog come from? This place doesn't look quite the same as where you were before. And on top of that, you have this bad feeling that something terrible is coming towards you. The sun that was very present before disappeared quicker than you ever thought was possible, and now you're reliant on the lampposts that decorate the sides of 11.3. To make things worse, large sections of the buildings around you are going to be rubble in the middle of the streets, which include the ones that are currently falling off the building, so that's an interesting threat. But regardless, this is going to be blocking many of the already cramped alleyways and streets that this level mostly consists of. Not to mention, navigation is going to be extremely difficult because of how different the sound works here. The things around you will often sound a lot further from when they actually are, or a lot closer than they actually are, or from the wrong direction than they're actually coming from, and as you can assume, it's not a fun time in general. Not to mention your voice and any sound you make while moving is going to carry a lot farther, often alerting some of the entities in your immediate vicinity to your location. And that brings up the question, well, the last 2 levels haven't had much for entities. What about this one? Well, calling this level an entity infestation wouldn't really be that far from the truth, as it contains more entities than you can even begin to comprehend surviving, few of which being smilers, skin stealers, and a fun little thing called a phobia, which, true to its name, plays off of the worst fears of the wanderer. So the limits to what could be present here are honestly vast. Time also appears to be hard to keep track of, as well as making reality feel slow or fast, assumably causing intense confusion. And as you can assume, people don't usually leave here, and no one will risk coming after you. With this in mind, it's no wonder this level easily takes our #1 spot. Category: Insanity-Inducing Mansion. Entity threat: little to none. Environmental threat: Mind Break. Now, I honestly don't really know how people end up here, but I guess that's kind of a common theme for the Backroom. When you initially enter this level, you're going to see a lot of stairways, some going up and others going down. If you try to go to the ones going up, you're going to end up in a room that's very identical to the one you're in now. So essentially, the only direction you're able to go is down, and the deeper you get, the more damage to your psyche will begin to occur. Let me elaborate a bit. If you look around you in this area, as you head down more flights, the wallpaper around you will start to deteriorate, doors will start to come off the hinges, and other small structural damages, almost as if there's something in the air down here that deteriorates everything it touches. You're going to be using this as a mark to how screwed you are, as starting at level 5 and 6, you're going to begin to start to get the mental effect of this level and want to end your own life. And by the time you get to level 2, this feeling is going to be unbearable, and it's likely that if you don't leave this level immediately, you're going to succumb to its effects. Throughout these floors, there are often many assorted rooms inside, with the most relevant of which being the portrait gallery that contains many random pieces of art with various people in them. You must keep your eyes on these at all times, as the more you take your eyes off of them, the more they will become enraged until eventually they will disappear from the frame and murder the wanderer in the most brutal and painful way possible. Other than the mental effects, it doesn't have the same threat as our last level, but the mental effects here are significantly worse than level 9.5, so it'll be sliding into our 3rd slot. Category: Infinite Sewers. Entity threat: pathogenic. Environmental threat: biohazard. Now I'm gonna be honest with you guys, if I was stuck in the Backrooms for hours or God forbid days or weeks, and then I went through all of these levels only to end up in an infinite sewer level, I would seriously consider doing something very demonetizable. Level 34, on top of being a biohazard that will give you a plethora of diseases and infections, is also a claustrophobic nightmare full of both wet and dry tunnels. And this is going to require crawling through most of the level. The level is on the colder side, but nothing too extreme, but it is enough to multiply bacteria, including in the air. If you're in this level for too long, you're almost guaranteed a deadly sickness or disease, which without any form of medical help or modern medicine, you could easily die a slow and painful death. This level is almost impossible to exit once entered, but there are rumors of doors and ladders that lead out, and these seem to give some hope. Regardless of how disgusting this level is, it doesn't have many physical entities, but the suffering induced from this level is no joke. And if you do die here, it's long and painful rather than the quick end of some of the others. So I would say this level is going to belong at bare minimum in our number 2 slot. Category: Grayscale Abyss. Entity threat: unknown. Environmental threat: extreme. Avoid at all costs. The shady gray is somewhat of an anomaly. Upon entering, you will notice everything around you has no color, including your person and anything you have with you. Now, this may seem to make things difficult, and trust me, you have no idea how much it's going to complicate things in the future, but for now, try to not let it send you into a panic, as you're going to need to retain a calm mind in order to have a somewhat chance of surviving this level. But I'm gonna be honest, the Meg doesn't restrict this level for nothing, and you likely probably aren't making it out of here. Regardless, in order to navigate this level, you're going to need to make it through the 8 different sections. First, you're going to awaken in a dense gray jungle, and while this may seem intimidating, it surprisingly is going to be the easiest section by a long shot. And the biggest threat is going to be the day-night cycle that while mostly harmless during the day, becomes substantially worse by night, and you will lose the ability to see anything, even if you possess a light source, due to, the grayness. Almond water also becomes useless, as while it flows to the rivers during the day, by night turns into the acid substance otherwise known as liquid pain. When you can see, however, you're going to notice that most of the trees are going to be blurred, and that carcasses of almost mutated animal resembling things decorate the floor around you. However, you're not going to want to look at them for too long because it will cause you to go insane. These things, as I could probably assume, are killed by what comes out at night. But don't worry, you won't ever find out what that is, as if you end up here at the wrong time and it gets dark, it's not like you're going to be telling anybody. Your only hope would be to dig into the next section, about, I would say, 10 meters down, until you fall into the second section, which is an extremely unstable mansion that is run and controlled by one entity known as the landlord. If you're lucky, you will not encounter him at all, because while powerful, he doesn't immediately track you the second you spawn in, and if you're very careful and quiet, he can be avoided. If you do spot him, however, he appears almost as a shadow, and he will immediately attempt to lock you in a distorting room where you will die a horrible, slow death, all while being angrily screamed at. The only way to exit is frequently running door to door until you find an exit and praying he doesn't find a way to locate you. Now, I don't know about this next level, but this is going to be the level where personally I would lose my shit. While visibly you're in a snowy forest, but rather than being freezing as it would appear, it is over 100 degrees, and many people will die of heat stroke promptly after entering because of this illusion. So you're just going to want to expect to treat this like a desert, mostly just protecting yourself from sunburn and other sun-related or heat-related injury. Other than that, this level is mostly going to be normal, unless you count the fallen angel, which are essentially one of the only entities on the level, and they appear as semi-mangled corpses with wings. And for the most part, they'll leave you alone unless you bring up the specific level that they seem to have some sort of traumatic past on, and this will cause them to attack and kill you. But other than that, for the most part, continue on to the next level safely. So if you're thinking it possibly couldn't get any weirder, you would be dead wrong, as between toxic oceans that are filled with both hostile tribes, armed MAG members, and floating clocks in the water that could oddly kill you quite easily, or at the same time are your only way out, to then cityscapes full of entities and collapsing buildings, not to mention the deeper levels that essentially have nowhere either back once you enter them or out in general. You simply just disintegrate and die. There are technically more levels, but I don't think anyone is making it there, so I'm just gonna cut it here and say this level is gonna be number 1, as it's basically its own mini backrooms on hard mode. Category: extreme pool room. Entity threat: none. Environmental threat: mental hell. The pool rooms is essentially going to be widely known as one of the most vibey spots that the Backrooms has to offer, even when it can be liminal to the point of creepy and panic-inducing. The calm, tranquil pools make it impossible not to sit down and relax for a bit, but I wouldn't relax too much. Hey, stay awake. Don't fall asleep, dumbass. Oh god, what have we gotten ourselves into now? Okay, now I gotta admit, going into a red pool rooms wasn't necessarily on my list today, but here we are. The heat in this level is honestly going to make me question whether I should have stayed in the sewer level from earlier, as you are constantly surrounded by 115 degree steam. This is going to begin to burn your lungs and eyes after being exposed to it for more than a couple minutes. But that's not even the worst part. Upon getting into this level, you're going to want to stay as low to the ground as humanly possible, even if you have to slide on your stomach, as the steam will rise, and on top of feeling miserable, it contains an airborne variant of the psychoactive drug that is native to the water in this level, also known as eternol. Eternol is a fun little chemical that messes with time perception, making 1 second feel like at first 12 seconds, then a few minutes, then finally, after being in this level for 24 hours, an entire year. At this point, you will undoubtedly want death, but it'll be impossible as time will move too slow in your brain, and it would just take years to walk a few steps from your perspective, not to mention find an exit. Even if you are removed by another wanderer, it would take a rare herb from a place hundreds of levels away in order to reset your mind back to normal. This level seems like one of the worst forms of torture imaginable, and I wouldn't wish it on even my worst enemy. But I don't think it quite compares to our number 1, so I'll put it at the number 2 slot for now. Now, as you reach the end of this section, you're going to notice in this level a crimson light coming through the windows. But it's not going to be the same crimson light that we just saw in 37.6, or even the one in the red rooms from part 1. This is going to be a calmer and more ominous light. You're likely going to spawn in one of the 30 Soviet-style buildings that adorn this level, and this light is going to seep in from every crack, window, or other surface that leads to the outside. But no matter what, do not view the source, as doing so will collapse your sanity. Hello and welcome, Wanderer. It is time that we go over Ross Syndrome, an affliction that will likely run rampant on your journey through the ever-changing levels of the Backrooms, also known as Phenomenon 35, or the Wretched Cycle. It is known as the worst and most common threat any Wanderer will face here in the Backrooms. It is present on every level and can be contracted by anybody simply by letting this environment erode your brain and sanity. Believe it or not, this has actually been researched on Earth as well, but it is treated more like a possession more than a mental cycle. The first state of this begins with subtle signs that many people won't accept as it's starting. Oh, it's just my imagination. Is a common stage of denial, yet this denial is often what pushes people past the point of no return. During stage 2, hallucinations will reach a critical level, headaches will make thinking near impossible, and memory loss will increase. But to be honest, this is only the least of it. The victim becomes detached from reality, stuck in delusions. They will not realize where they are. It is crucial they aren't allowed near a mirror, as if so, delusions will become so severe that they will view themselves as so horrendous that they will begin to remove their skin and damage themselves physically in other ways. It is then that the mood switching phase will occur. This consists of the wanderer switching between extreme mania, aka acting erratically and uncontrollably, extreme anger, which would mostly consist of lashing out and attacking those around them, or intense fear of the hallucinations and real people or environment, and finally extreme intense fear of the hallucination and of course any real people left around them or the environment that they are in, and finally extreme depression and loss of will to live. Remember, this is something that would even be held in the comfort of your own home, not to mention on top of whatever level you are inside. Even if you were taken to another wanderer facility, it is crucial to remember that the people around you at this stage will consider you a lost cause, ejecting you from the compound, and the ones that don't and proceed with you, you will likely end up killing and eating alive. You will no longer be classified as a human, but rather an instance of Entity 15. So take this as a lesson. Insanity matters, as losing your mind in the backrooms can be as little as letting that stress or anxiety or fear get to you a little too much, and can just as easily send you down this cycle, and nobody wants that. So remember, drink your almond water and keep your sanity up.